You clicked this video because some part of you knows you don't want to wake up one day and realize you lived the wrong life. Because that's what happens. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Through every silent compromise, every lie you tell to fit in, every truth you ignore just to stay safe. Until one day, you open your eyes and you can't recognize the person staring back. That's not fate. That's a pattern. And Nietzsche, he saw it coming. Because behind his rage, behind his bitterness, was one message. You'll either learn now or suffer later. And if you're watching this, there's still time. The first truth: you were never taught how to think, only how to obey. From the moment you're born, you're taught to conform. Raise your hand, sit still, memorize, repeat. Not once are you asked what you think. You're only taught what to think, and worse, you're rewarded for repeating it. Nietzsche believed this was the death of the individual spirit, because the crowd doesn't want you to think. It wants you to agree. And so, most people grow up mistaking obedience for intelligence. They become experts at mimicking success, following rules, doing what's expected, but they lose the ability to question. And when you lose that, you don't just lose your freedom, you lose yourself. Real thinking is dangerous. It threatens systems. But Nietzsche saw clearly. A life lived without independent thought isn't a life at all. It's just a performance in someone else's story. And by the time most people realize they never truly thought for themselves, they're already too deep in a life they didn't choose. The second truth: most people want comfort more than truth. If you show most people the truth, they won't thank you. They'll reject you. Because comfort is addictive. It's warm, familiar, and predictable. The truth, on the other hand, is often cold, ugly, and inconvenient. Nietzsche called this out in every era, the way people pretend to love truth, but really just want reassurance. They don't want to be awakened. They want to be coddled. And so they surround themselves with easy answers, feel-good slogans, and groupthink opinions. Not because they are evil, but because they're afraid. But the truth doesn't care if you're afraid. It doesn't soften itself for your feelings. It shows you reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. And most people, Nietzsche believed, can't handle that. So they choose ignorance, distraction, and fantasy, until one day, truth crashes through their comfortable world anyway. By then, it's usually too late. The third truth: what hurts you is often what reveals you. People avoid pain like it's poison. But Nietzsche saw pain as a kind of mirror, the only one that reflects who you truly are. He said, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find meaning in the suffering. What you fear reveals what you're attached to. What breaks you reveals what you've neglected. What you fight reveals who you think you are." Yet most people try to silence pain rather than listen to it. They medicate it, avoid it, distract from it. But pain doesn't leave. It waits. It grows. And eventually, it forces a confrontation. Nietzsche didn't believe in running from pain. He believed in walking straight into it, because only by facing it can you become something stronger than what hurt you. By the time most people understand that pain wasn't the enemy, they've already lost years avoiding it. The fourth truth: the crowd is rarely right, but always loud. There's something seductive about the crowd. It gives you identity, purpose, certainty. You feel safe because everyone else believes the same thing. But Nietzsche warned that the crowd is not wise. It's just loud. It doesn't think. It reacts. It doesn't question. It repeats. And the more people it gathers, the more dangerous it becomes. He wrote, "Insanity in individuals is something rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule." Most people realize too late that they built their lives on the approval of people who were just as lost as they were. They didn't chase truth. They chased validation. They didn't stand for something. They blended in. And the tragedy is this. By the time they realize the crowd was wrong, they've already sacrificed their individuality to belong. If you want to live a life that's truly yours, you will have to disappoint the crowd. And most people, Nietzsche said, aren't brave enough to do that until their time has run out. The fifth truth: kindness without strength makes you a target. You were probably told to be nice, to be polite, agreeable, generous. But Nietzsche didn't glorify blind kindness. He saw that without strength, kindness becomes weakness. Because predators don't respect kindness, they exploit it. Takers don't stop because you're generous. They take more. The world doesn't reward softness, it rewards strategy. Nietzsche wrote, "The weak are always forced to lie." Why? Because without strength, you can't afford honesty. You suppress your needs, hide your boundaries, shrink your voice, all in the name of peace. But peace without power isn't peace. It's submission. The person who's kind and strong, that person changes lives. But the person who's only kind, they get used, discarded, and forgotten. And most people only learn this after years of betrayal by friends, family, and even themselves. You've now heard 5 of Nietzsche's warnings. 5 truths people only realize when they've already paid the price. But this is only the beginning, because the next 4 truths are darker. They explain why your discipline disappears, why your shadow keeps sabotaging you, and why people say they support you until you finally start to succeed. It gets more personal, more uncomfortable, and far more real. If you think you're ready for that, let's go. The 6th truth: discipline isn't motivation, it's self-respect. Most people chase motivation like it's a magic key. They wait for the right mood, the perfect setup, the inspirational quote that'll push them forward. But Nietzsche would laugh at that, because he understood something deeper. The person who waits for motivation is already surrendering their power. Discipline, Nietzsche knew, wasn't about hustle culture or punishment. It was about integrity. He believed a person's ability to act despite their feelings, especially when it's hard, is the purest form of self-respect. Think about it. You brush your teeth, not because you're inspired, but because it's who you are. You protect your boundaries, not because it's easy, but because they matter to you. Discipline isn't fueled by mood, it's rooted in meaning. When you tie your actions to how you feel in the moment, you build a life on sand. But when you act from your values, even on the hard days, you become someone solid, someone dependable, someone unstoppable. Most people learn this only after years of broken goals, missed opportunities, and self-betrayals. They think they have a motivation problem, but what they really have is a respect problem. The 7th truth: people support you until you threaten their identity. Everyone loves the idea of you improving, as long as you don't surpass them, as long as your growth doesn't challenge their comfort zone, their status, or their unspoken narratives. Nietzsche was brutally honest about this. He believed that most people don't consciously want you to fail, but they also don't truly want you to evolve past the role they've assigned you. Why? Because your growth forces them to confront their own stagnation. Your success reveals their excuses. Your transformation breaks the equilibrium. That's why when you start setting boundaries, chasing ambition, or speaking your truth, some people won't celebrate. They'll distance, they'll mock, they'll suddenly not vibe with you anymore. This doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you've stopped shrinking for their comfort. Most people only realize this after losing relationships they thought were forever, but those relationships were built on the version of you that never changed. And that version is gone. The eighth truth: your shadow will sabotage you if you ignore it. Everyone has a shadow, the hidden self, the parts of you were told not to show. Your anger, your shame, your jealousy, your selfishness. And Nietzsche, just like Jung later, understood that suppressing the shadow only makes it stronger. The more you reject a part of yourself, the more control it gains behind the scenes. It seeps into your decisions, your tone, your cravings. It whispers sabotaging thoughts when things are going well. It lashes out when you're finally close to peace. People think being good means being harmless. But Nietzsche saw that real strength comes from integrating the shadow, not hiding it. Because a person who knows their darkness doesn't get controlled by it. Imagine your shadow like a child locked in a basement. The longer it's ignored, the louder it screams, and the more damage it causes. But once it's seen, heard, understood, it stops being a monster. It becomes your ally. Most people don't learn this until they've destroyed something they loved and realize too late that it wasn't life that betrayed them. It was the unacknowledged parts of themselves they refused to face. The ninth truth: you can't think clearly if you're always pleasing everyone. One of the most seductive traps in life is people-pleasing. It looks kind. It feels safe. But Nietzsche saw it for what it truly is: a mask. When you prioritize others' expectations over your own truth, you lose access to your clarity. You second-guess every word. You overanalyze every decision. You dilute your instincts. People-pleasing isn't generosity. It's fear in disguise. Fear of rejection. Fear of confrontation. Fear of being alone. But here's the tragedy. The more you please others, the less they see you. Nietzsche believed that to know oneself truly requires disappointing people, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Because your authentic life will always contradict someone else's vision of you. Most people don't realize this until they look around one day and wonder, why does no one actually know the real me? It's because you trained them to love your performance, not your truth. And by the time that truth finally demands to be seen, the people around you might not recognize it. Or worse, they might resent it. You've now heard 9 truths, and each one is like a quiet scream from your future self, warning you of what happens when you ignore them. But we're not done, because in the final 4 truths, we'll go even deeper. We'll talk about why you still feel empty even after doing everything right. Why attention is replacing meaning, and how Nietzsche saw death, not as an end, but as a mirror. The final part will challenge you, not just to think, but to change. Let's dive in. The 10th. Truth. You can still feel empty after doing everything right. We're taught that if we check the boxes, get the degree, land the job, find the partner, stay out of trouble, then happiness will follow. But Nietzsche saw the hollowness behind these promises. He believed that doing everything right often leads people not to joy, but to quiet despair. Why? Because you can follow every rule society gives you and still end up living someone else's idea of a meaningful life. And when you finally get there, after years of sacrifice, you expect fulfillment. But what you find is a haunting question. Why don't I feel whole? Nietzsche warned that this kind of existential emptiness comes from mistaking structure for substance, from replacing inner truth with outer validation, from obeying expectations instead of exploring desire. Most people realize this too late, when their life is already built, when there's too much to undo. And they either numb the ache or start over. But there's another way. You stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What's mine to do?" That's the path out of the void. Not more effort, not more success, but more truth. The 11th truth. Meaning is rare, and attention is a poor substitute. We live in a world addicted to being seen. Likes, views, shares. It feels like meaning. But Nietzsche would say, that's not connection. It's performance. Attention is cheap. Meaning is sacred. And one of the biggest mistakes people make is chasing the former while starving for the latter. Why do people do it? Because it's faster. It's visible. It gives feedback, but it's hollow. And when the spotlight fades, as it always does, what's left? Nietzsche believed that meaning doesn't come from how many people see you. It comes from what you see when you're alone, from doing work that aligns with your essence, from speaking words that matter, even if they echo in silence. Most people don't understand this until they've gotten attention and still feel unknown, until they've been praised and still feel unseen. By the time they learn this, they've built a persona they can't live without and lost a self they barely knew. The 12th truth. Death doesn't steal, it clarifies. We think of death as a thief. It takes time. It takes people. It interrupts plans. But Nietzsche didn't fear death. He saw it as a clarifying force. Because when you remember you will die, you remember what matters. He asked, if you had to live this exact life over and over again for eternity, would you? Most couldn't say yes. And that's the point. Death, Nietzsche taught, is not the enemy. It's the mirror. It strips away the noise, the excuses, the delay. It asks, are you spending your time or wasting it? Are you loving deeply or performing affection? Are you living or just continuing? Most people only wake up to these questions when they've lost someone, when they've faced a diagnosis, when time shows up, not as infinite, but as a closing door. And by then, the life unlived starts to haunt more than death itself. The 13th truth. Your freedom will cost you everything that was fake. This is Nietzsche's final and perhaps most brutal truth. He believed that to become truly free, not just externally, but psychologically, you have to destroy every illusion that kept you safe. Your false friendships, your coping mechanisms, your titles, your need to be liked. Freedom, he said, is not given. It's taken. And the price? Everything that's not real. Because real freedom is terrifying. It's standing alone in your truth. It's saying no when it costs you approval. It's not needing to belong because you've finally found belonging within yourself. Most people flirt with freedom. They dip their toes in it. But when the shedding starts, when the fake starts to fall away, they panic. Because the familiar, even if it's false, feels safer than the unknown. But Nietzsche believed, until you lose what isn't truly yours, you'll never discover what is. And most people, they learn that only after years of quiet resentment. After years of wondering, why do I feel like a stranger in my own life? You've just heard 13 of the most painful and liberating truths people learn too late in life. And Nietzsche didn't share these truths to shame or scare you. He shared them to awaken you. Because every one of these truths is a fork in the road. Ignore them, and you drift. Live them, and you begin. And maybe you're not ready to change everything yet. That's okay. Awareness always comes before action. But if even one of these truths shook something loose in you, don't let it fade. Comment below. Which one hit you the hardest? Which one are you still resisting? And if this video made you feel seen, subscribe. We're building a space for people who want more than surface-level advice. People who want to think deeper, feel stronger, and finally, live differently.